And I'm going to let everyone say hello.
Hi.
All right, and we are going to give this a go. So if you guys see me standing off to the side, I hope for this crew I don't take up too much of your space, but I'm trying to get out of the frame most of the shot. All right, let's see how I can scroll to the next page. There we go. All right, so one of the things I want to give you a primer on is what my workspace looks like when I'm creating in-house graphics, so that we are starting on the same level playing field here. And it doesn't mean that what your individual setup is wrong. I just want you to know when I say this is what I do, I want you to know where that's coming from. So I largely use a Windows laptop, and when I'm at a desk in my office or at home, I almost always am connected to an external monitor because I'm definitely one of those people who needs a lot of working space. So if you have the opportunity to have one for your office setup when you're doing in-house graphic design, I think you'll find it very, very beneficial. And those have really come down significantly in cost. I mean, you can go into Office Max and Staples on a good day and grab a $50 monitor that will do just fine for this purpose. And if we have a shop local Raleigh supplier, please let me know who those are, and I will gladly mention them instead of Office Max next time. Sometimes I use a Chromebook, so you definitely don't have to be on a Mac or a PC. Anything that can get you connected to the web will probably work for most of your in-house purposes. This is great because it's a $300 laptop ready to go. So if you are growing your team and you want them to have the ability to work on something, but maybe you can't afford to buy them a $2,000 MacBook, this is a good starting point. It's lightweight, it's reliable, and as long as you have access to the internet, it works just fine. I find a USB mouse is a game changer. You can try and do a lot of this on your trackpad, but at a certain point, you'll probably have a meltdown over that, trying to line things up and get everything where you want it to go. So those USB mouse, I think they start at like $15. Great investment. I almost always have one in my purse and my work bag. I use the Chrome browser for my internet browser more than anything. And I also use this really great free add-on called Colorzilla. And that is something that if you have Chrome or if you have Firefox, you can go and download that for free right now. What that does, that allows you to identify a color on a graphic, on a web page, anything, so that you can color match things so they look consistently. So instead of trying to go through a color picker and eyeball, does that green match this green and that purple match? You can do an exact color match using that free tool. And then I'm putting a little star here next to the Adobe Creative Suite that says results not typical, because the Adobe Creative Suite is a professional level software. It is very expensive. It has now gone up. I think if you're doing the monthly Creative Suite option, I think I just got a pricing change notice last week that it's went up $65 a month. So for a small business, that can be a little cost prohibitive. And I will say that the Creative Suite has a major learning curve. There's 8 different tools you can use, different software packages. And if it's something that you are really enjoying and you get a lot of value doing it for your business, absolutely go to your local community college and sign up for their certificate courses. When I graduated from NC State, I had a degree in textile management and a degree in business management. But you know what they didn't teach me how to do? How to Photoshop, how to use InDesign. We had a little bit of exposure to those things through the textile school, but not in this manner, not for creating business graphics. So I was armed with this, great 4-year degree, cost my parents a pretty penny, and I had to contract out a lot of my stuff. And I realized very quickly that wasn't sustainable. So I started looking at classes in the area, and I realized that Wake Tech offered them for like $60 a pop. It would be a 6-week class. I mean, you can't beat that kind of value. So I'm a huge advocate of that, and if you're a hands-on, I need to sit down in a class and be taught it, that is a great way to go. Yes, please. Absolutely. Questions all the time. Don't hesitate to interrupt.
If this is still the case, I remember when I took certificate courses, I was able to get the student rate on software at NC State as well. So if you really love Adobe, then take a class and save money.
Yes, so that is a great opportunity, especially if you're buying the software kit. I was just thinking about that this morning. I don't know if they even sell it on a CD anymore. Yeah, I was kind of thinking that's probably gone, the way. But one of the things they have become wise to is that they do check your enrollment at a certain point now and verify. So you've probably got about a year that you can go down that route. But I think it's like half price. I think it's $29 a month if you are, a student, you have a university email address. So definitely look for opportunities like that. And in the nonprofit segment, there may be discounted options for y'all too.
I was going to say TechSoup if you're a 501c3, and it's a huge discount.
And there are open source options out there that compete with the Creative Suite, and those are fine. But in my industry, because we're doing so much more beyond in-house graphic design, you know, we've done billboards, print ads, things like that, we have to have access to it. But I will tell you, I don't buy it for my entire team because $60 a month for everybody on my team adds up really, really quickly. So I have one big beefy license, and then we kind of cobble it together for the rest of my team based on their needs. So this graphic here, it's a little bit muted on this image, but what we did here is for one of our real estate clients, we actually took her new website when we designed it, we imposed it on all these digital assets. Now this is something that you absolutely are going to need Photoshop to do, and this is not a entry-level type graphic. This is something that one of my girls on my team, she probably spent the better part of 2 hours working on that. So not really applicable for a quick social media graphic, but it's something that we knew we were going to use over and over again on her website and her social media and her newsletter and print collateral. So we went ahead and invested the time in doing that. But that was not something that, you know, I expect you guys to walk away from this class being ready to go with. And I do, you know, want to mention that my entire team uses MacBooks. For better or worse, they're millennials, and they came in loving their Mac products. So that's what they work on, because I'd rather them work on something they're comfortable with and try and teach them how to use a PC. But I've always used a PC. I'm more comfortable with that, so that's what I use. So the very, very basics of your brand starts with your logo and your visual identity. Quick show of hands in here. How many of you already have a logo? Pretty much everyone? Okay. How many of you have a logo but really know how it was designed? All right, one, maybe two people. That's kind of where I thought we might be. So good starting point. This is one that we just did for Terry Hires, who you guys will likely meet through the Shop Raleigh circuit. Shop Local Raleigh circuit here in the coming months. She is a personalized wellness coach. So we walked through an entire design process with her. And that's what you're going to get when you hire a professional graphic designer. Now, if you are starting a new venture or you decide it's time for a new version of your logo, you do have a lot of options. There are some more cost-conscious ones where you can basically crowdsource, you can go to 99 Designs and things like that, where you can basically put out a bid, you know, $100, $300, $500, whatever it is, and you get a lot of options and you kind of whittle it down from there. And that is absolutely a great option, especially for startup businesses that are particularly cash-strapped. 99 Designs is one example of it, but you can just Google the phrase, you know, logo design online or something like that. And some of the pluses and minuses of that are that obviously it's quick and it's cost efficient. But some of the drawbacks is that you're not going to be really in an iterative design process. So you're going to have to be ready to go up front with your pitch about what you're looking for. You're going to have to give really, really good direction and get really great product out of that. The other thing you're going to get to is it's a wild gamut of the experience and the actual end product you're going to end up with. So you may have something that looks great on, you know, the initial image you get, but then you get the raw file and you realize it's kind of a hot mess. So if you were to send it out for merchandise production, embroidery, things like that, it may be problematic going further down the road, and you really don't have a ton of control over that designer's quality at that point. So I don't say that to scare you and to, you know, protect what we do as graphic designers. I just say that as that's sometimes what you're going to come up with. You pay for what you get. Now, when we sit down with a client, we do it's pretty much like a 6-step process. So we're going to give you guys a quick primer on that today. I want you to know what to ask of the graphic designer. I want you to ask what format your final version is going to be provided to you in. The basic, most simplest thing you're looking for is a vector format. And basically what that means is that that logo was designed in a software that instead of being rasterized or designed on individual 1x1 pixels, it is a wild creation of lines and shapes and mathematical formulas, so they scale and grow infinitely smaller or infinitely bigger. You can put it on a billboard with no loss of resolution. You can put it on a business card. If your logo is designed in a raster software, that is not going to be the case. At some point, you are going to have a degradation of quality when you expand it beyond a certain size. So you're looking for someone who's a vector designer or designing in a vector format. You're also looking for something that is designed in layers so that you can turn things on or off as you need to adapt it. Sometimes when you're going with a logo that's got a lot of thin little letters here, it may not render on all sorts of situations or all sorts of materials very elegantly. Maybe you just want the apple as part of it. So if these are all designed as individual layers or pieces of the puzzle, you can scale it. You can say, oh, I just want this piece of my logo, or I just want this piece. The other thing you can do too is sometimes the shape that your final logo ends up in isn't really applicable for all situations. So I'll give you a good example for this. I used to work at WRAL, and if you guys know the Big Five, it's tall five, WRAL correspondent, that makes it a very tall logo. So there were a lot of scenarios where we needed it to fit in a square spot or maybe a wide space, and you would lose a little bit of that brand identity by trying to make, round peg fit in square hole. So one of the things you want to do is sometimes consider, are there multiple versions of your logo? Is there a stacked version? Is there a square version? Is there one that's just an icon set? Is there one with just text? And that's something that if you sit down with a professional designer, they're going to work through a lot of those different versions for you. And that may be part of what you get as your final output, is you get a couple of different versions. Providing direction along the way. Do you have color palettes that speak to you? Do you have things that you're already identifying with your business? Mark, from a real estate perspective, you may say, an outline of a home is really, something that I personally want or I don't want, because it's really common in real estate. Maybe I want something that's driven by a key, or maybe I want something that's tied into the 999 because that's part of my, listing presentation. Giving your designer as much actionable feedback and direction will really help you get the results you're happy with. And then going beyond the logo. This is a really good opportunity to define what color palettes are going to be part of your brand. What font styles? Do you absolutely hate Times New Roman and you don't want feet on your text? Well, let your designer know that, and they'll work with you to pick lots of options here. One of the things I want to point out is that when you are having a new logo done, it might be beneficial to try and stay in the realm of fonts that are universally available. We have several clients that we've worked on logo projects where text that was part of their logo was actually custom drawn. So it's not really a repeatable thing. So when it got time to make menus or flyers or brochures and they wanted to have the logo text as part of their collateral, it wasn't really a repeatable thing. It wasn't a logo, it wasn't a font that they could just download and put on their computer and create a graphic out of. So I actually have a project we're working on right now where we are taking a 10-year-old logo, we are actually replacing that text that's not repeatable with something that they can download and put on all their employees' computers, so that way they can use more branded materials throughout all of their marketing communications. Google Fonts is a great place to look for this because you can download those fonts for free in most situations. But fonts are kind of like anything else. You can go out and you can find a ton of them, and some of them are going to be free. Some are going to be free for personal use only and not commercial, and some are going to have a big price tag on them. So there's a lot of scenarios out there, and there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all, but these are just things to be kind of cognizant of during the design process. All right, so let's talk about color palettes for a second. And let's talk about finding inspiration. What colors do you want to be defined as a part of your brand? One of the best places to find this is somewhere you've probably already browsed for tonight's dinner recipe or next week's outfit. Just searching the phrase color palette on Pinterest has been a huge resource for us because there are wonderfully gifted townspeople out there who put together all these amazing collections. And I sometimes will start a project here, not because I'm looking for something specific, because I'm looking for inspiration. I mean, they'll literally take a photo, and this is something you'll see a lot in interior design. They'll take a photo and draw the colors attached to it. This is just like shopping at the section of Lowe's where they've got all the beautiful paint samples, and they've got a room, and here's all the colors that match it. I find this is a really good tool for brainstorming with clients who say, we know what our business is going to be about, but we don't have any idea what we want visually the brand identity to look like. So I'll look for examples that have the image that's related to something they're doing. So, if I was working with a landscape company, I would look for pictures that had plants in it or something horticulture based. If I was working with a restaurant client, I would look for color palettes that were developed from food photography. That was actually how we actually picked Carrie's color palette for Hires Health, because we went and looked for great graphics of healthy foods that she could use as stock imagery on our site. We pulled the colors from there because that's kind of the focus of her guidance for her clients. And what's really cool too is that once you just do this generic color palette phrase, they have bright, they have rustic, they have for the home, they have fall, vintage, green. So you could pick another color palette for every new project you do or every new season. Let's say your business has some seasonal variation and what you offer changes by time of the year. It would be really cool to take your one color logo and adapt it for different seasons and different uses. Sometimes a logo that's all white obviously isn't going to show up well on light backgrounds. So there may be an opportunity for you to pick another color palette that works well with the situation you're designing for. This is something I want you guys to remember, color-hex.com. And again, this will be on our website, so don't worry if you don't get it down. But what this does is this gives you a good breakdown of a single color when you have the hex value. So the hex value is something that, using that ColorZilla tool I mentioned, you can color match, find out what that hex value is. A lot of software like Canva, Photoshop, things will do that too. And if you've received a brand deck from your designer, like I showed on the earlier screen, a lot of times those colors will already be identified for you. What's your CMYK value? What's your RGB? What's your hex value? A quick rundown is that hex value, you're normally going to see this when it comes to web design. The colors that are on a website are hex values. CMYK colors are traditionally print materials. RGB is traditionally digital. Now there's a lot of different ways that those might get used, but that's kind of a good rule of thumb. So for this 8860D0, that is purple. That is this shade of purple, this color here. What's pretty cool is that it will give you the complementary colors. So if you're wondering right off the bat, what's a good fit for this, you don't have to go to the color wheel of our kindergarten years. You can start here. But you can also see how different it might look on a darker or light background. Perception is one of those really interesting things about choosing color palettes, is that based on where you're applying it, it might look completely different. And I apologize if anyone is colorblind and these just look like random shapes.
Quick question.
Yes.
How is PMS different than the CMYK and the RGB and the hex?
PMS is a color matching system that normally you're going to find with like apparel and other printed goods. It is just another kind of color standard. And so PMS is also something that you can find out what the PMS color code is for your brand color. And when you're sending something to, like, let's say an apparel company or screen printing, you can say, I want this color matched to this color. Now, when you get into color matching, it can get very complicated and very expensive. So that could be its own, sort of seminar in itself. But that is the Pantone system. Right. So that is just, another one in the designer's toolkit. And it's good to know where you guys fall for your particular color palette. And sometimes there may not be an exact match. It's usually, there's so many colors in the Pantone system and obviously in the hex system. So you're going to find something pretty close, if not exactly the same. But that's just one of those things that you want to go through the process with a designer or using software to identify which colors are yours. So that way you can provide the right direction to any of your providers. If you are sourcing something and you can go to them and say, here are all my color standards, that's going to help them a lot rather than them opening a file assuming that it's the right version and it's not. One thing you'll see is that when an original file has been converted to multiple different colored profiles, it can actually lose its original value along the way. You guys have probably seen this in scenarios where someone sent you a file that was really neon looking, and you're like, I know that their logo is not that color. And a lot of times it's just been changed format and the settings weren't done correctly, and it's been emailed around 4 times, and someone opened it in another software and then saved it with another color profile, and it gets just really wonky. So being able to give a vendor, here are my color palettes, and here are all my color codes to match, will help them go back and double check and say, that doesn't look right. They can check it, they can pull out their Pantone swatches and say, yep, what I'm seeing here is wholly, 10, 20 shades different. Let me go back and see if we can get a better quality file or an original file for this. All right, so let's talk about Canva for a little bit. I'm at 9:30. I think I can wrap up in the next 15 minutes or so here. Canva is probably the best free tool out there for in-house graphic design right now, but it doesn't mean that it's a one-stop shop or an end-all be-all. So one of the things that I wholly advocate for is shelling out the $10 a month, $99 a year for the, I think they call it Canva for Work. So this is really, really great if you're managing a team, especially if you have interns or part-timers who may not be as well-versed in staying true to your core brand and your visual identity. Because what you can do is you can upload your brand fonts, and you can make sure that is the first option they see in the drop-down menu when they're creating a graphic. You can upload your brand colors and put your palette in there. You also get an amazing wealth of stock images that they've already licensed for redistribution. And that's something we're going to get to in a second. But the caveat to this is because it is such a great tool and people are starting to really understand what it is and use it, be prepared to see some repeats. You're going to, see some examples on social media where you love this graphic that you did and it was one of the templates in there, and then you're scrolling through your feed and damn. Okay, just like my St. Patrick's Day graphic looks a lot like somebody else's. So that's kind of one of the drawbacks, but this allows you to get something out there in 5 minutes that you may not have had the software or the capability or even the visual eye to do. So that's a trade-off, you have to be willing to make. And, for a quick social media post, my mindset is that I'd rather you post something, even if it might look something similar to someone else, and have something out there so that way you're talking about your brand, you're reminding people in your business, and not posting something just because you didn't have the time or the means to create it. Now with this in mind, you can absolutely upload your own graphics, you can absolutely upload your own logos. So instead of rolling out with just the generic one with the inspirational quote, dress it up a little bit. Swap out the pretty beach image with a picture of your product. Let's say you're a florist. Use your own photos for that. That's going to personalize it. Use your own color palette and your font text color. Use your own font choices in there. So that way it'll still stand out a little bit from everyone else using the same template. Output formats. This is also a really great option here because Canva gives you, typically depending on which item you've selected to work with, lots of different output formats. So if you choose one of their brochure or flyer formats, as part of the export process after you save, it will say, do you want to download this as a JPEG or a PNG or a PDF? So depending on who you're sending it to, you don't have to have the software to know how to say, how do I convert a PNG to a PDF or vice versa. It's going to give you those options built in, and that saves you a lot of time and money too. Something to be cognizant of is that if you are doing print collateral in here, brochures, flyers, postcards, things like that, and you are sending those graphics to your local friendly neighborhood print shop, you are going to want to select a box that says crop marks or printer's marks. Because the interesting truth is that they typically print wider than what your actual final image is, and they are cutting the trim around, so that way you've got a clean image with colors that run all the way to the side. So that's where we're going to be talking about crops and bleeds, and that is again another conversation for a much longer day. But that's a nice little check mark that Canva just builds into it for you, so you can send it to your printer ready to go, and they will not only be very appreciative, but they won't charge you for the additional design time that they'll have to put into creating the graphics ready to go on their equipment. So one of the great things about Canva is that when you start in after you've registered, you've got all the different formats already in here. So my suggestion is start with picking the right one for the job, but don't be afraid to mix up, especially on social media. It's really common for people to pick the square social media links. That was the original Instagram size, but Instagram now accommodates putting wider images and taller images. And on Twitter, you can upload images of various size. Now, if you're doing your Twitter cover photo or your, header cover photo for your Facebook page, then it's best to stick to the actual specifications, otherwise you're going to have to deal with some cropping, you're probably going to lose part of your messaging. But for your social media feed, for your email newsletter, for your blog post, that's definitely a good opportunity to switch it up so it doesn't look like a social media post that's been reused over and over again. Some things to be aware of too is that when you hover over with your mouse over this, like let's say you're selecting a Twitter post, it will actually put a little text here that will tell you the actual dimensions. Now, one thing that you have to be aware of is that Canva is a team of employees, just like everyone else here, and sometimes those sizes will change before they actually have had a chance to update all their templates and their sizes. This was really common with Facebook events for a little while. Facebook events used to have a certain size image, and then it changed, and it took Canva, I think it was probably a month or two before they caught up and had the new size standard in there. So there's always, a little bit of buyer beware. Do your due diligence, double check, see if that's the right size that's being recommended. And the other thing to remember too is that these are not vector images. This is rasterized or pixel-based design. So they do have a section that's called logos. And that is fine, again, if you're you need a really quick fix, cheap option. And maybe it's something that you're only going to use for a side project, or you're not going to be investing a lot in it. Because it's not, a vector format graphic that you're going to be able to get as a downloadable vector file, I would not go that route for a logo design if it's something that may ever be on a billboard, because it's just not going to scale that size, or something that you may use in a TV or video spot. It's probably not going to be high enough quality for that.
I have a question. Is there a way to create something in one design type in Canva, and then pull the structure of that into a different design type? So I start with social media post, but then I want to make a postcard out of it or something like that.
Yes and no. So one of the drawbacks to using Canva is that it's a proprietary software. So to take a little sidebar from the conversation, it's not something that you can download it and open it, send it to a designer and open in Photoshop. But it's also built, and if you guys haven't used it before, basically you take your mouse and you drag and drop, and things drop into place nicely and they scale. To redo something in another size, you can copy some of the elements from one piece to another, but I have found that they don't particularly scale very well. That is one of the trade-offs, in that they designed a bunch of really nice templates to get you going really quickly without being a designer. But it's kind of, again, that round peg, square hole. Not everything is created the same. So one of the ways that you can create some consistency is by using the same imagery, the same colors, the same text. And even if you're going to see more of the image in a different layout, there's still going to be some great consistency between the pieces. So it'll look like a cohesive set of graphics, even if it's not exactly, one for one the same. Now that's something that you can do in more professional software, is that in the Adobe Creative Suite, you can take an image and you can crop and stretch and do all those things. And that goes back to the layering that I mentioned earlier. When everything's created as an independent asset, you can scale the background without throwing your logo out of whack. That's something that once you've got a flattened or a saved image out of a software like Canva, you don't have that flexibility. So again, it's a free tool or a low-cost tool, but it's not going to have the full feature set that you would have with really, really expensive software. But 99.9% of people don't need the full feature set.
Lisa, just to note, I know I actually did play with the resize function. So at the top of the Canva bar, there's resize. You can then pick I want this to now be a Twitter poster. And I changed one of my designs recently, and it cut the edges off even when it resized it. So I still had to go back and redo it. But you can you can make a copy of it and then sort of play with it that way. But yeah, you pretty much have to just do them all individual.
And it's the way they designed it. When they've created the template for that size, they've made the text scaling to a certain size and to take up a certain amount of space. So it's just not a one-to-one scale.
It does work for something.
Yeah. Like square image to larger square image, no big deal. Rectangle image to wider rectangle image, again, still, pretty consistent, but square image to 8.5 by 11, it just, it's just not going to scale that way. Can I borrow that pic? I love that design. So let's talk about sourcing images and graphics. It never fails that we'll be working on a newsletter for a client or working on a website redesign, and they'll send us a whole bunch of images and say, I want to use X, Y, and Z. I'm like, these are beautiful. Where'd you get these from? Well, I just found them on Google. Awesome. All right. So, one thing we have to talk about is the legality of that. This is someone else's creative work. Now, there are a ton of sites where those people have loaded up all their creative work, and they're willing to take $1 to $10 per download. And for a lot of people, that works really well. There's, photographers on the Adobe Stock Collection who've had their images downloaded hundreds of thousands of times. And if Adobe's charging you $10 for it, they're probably giving that designer $1, but that's still not bad for one great shot. The trade-off from that is that you're probably going to see that imagery everywhere. How many of you guys have seen the billboards where you're like, I've seen that dog before. I know that dog. It's because he's the most downloaded stock dog on the internet. And that's absolutely fine. It's just something that, again, you have to be aware that it may not be unique to you. But if you sign up for membership to those sites, that's kind of the cheapest legal way to go about it. You've purchased it for commercial use. Now, one of the things you'll also see on those sites, and that's things like Adobe Stock or I think Vector Stock. There used to be a great one called Dollar Photo Club. It was $1 an image. You could pay $10 a month, $100 a month, and then Adobe bought them and changed it to $10 a month credit. So for a lot of our clients, it became very unsustainable. You know, they could swallow $20 a month for getting some great imagery. They're not going to shell out $200 a month for that. So, you know, some of the workarounds are to take your own photos. It's absolutely more time consuming, but you know that they belong to you. And once you make them part of your graphics with your logo on, it's going to be very tough for someone to use it and call it their own. If you have an iPhone like me, the portrait mode on the camera has really come a long way. It takes some pretty good looking pictures. So that's absolutely a good option for in-house. Another opportunity, especially in a group like Shop of Raleigh, is to consider hiring or trading out your services with a local photographer, especially the budding young ones who are looking to build their portfolio. Elizabeth got a great expertise in something that we all need help with this time of year. She's somebody that, you know, when she says, oh, I need new headshots or I want to get some photos done on my team for our website, if she's got a photography client, she might offer, you know, I charge $100 an hour for my services. What do you charge? Should we swap out a couple hours and go that route? If you own a salon or a service-based business or, you know, a restaurant, there are opportunities to trade there. But being that we represent a lot of hospitality clients, I will tell you that the more professional experienced photographers don't have to trade out their work either. So if the opportunity exists in your organization to have a photography budget, I absolutely recommend going down that path, especially if you are in an industry where your product is very driven visually. So for my restaurant clients, I need them to have good quality food photos. We, you know, decide what we want to eat based on the last picture that we saw, right? So I need them to have good quality stuff. For some of my professional service providers, I maybe don't need them to have one as much, but I do want them to have a really good headshot. So that's still something I want them to have in their arsenal. Again, like I mentioned, you can buy a subscription to these stock sites. They don't have just photos, so that's where you can make your money go further. You can download videos and songs if you want to do a fun little video. I don't think Canva does video yet, but there's a lot of other free and low-cost tools for doing video for your brand. That's a whole nother session in itself as well. One of the things that's probably against the terms of service, but I think it's prudent to mention, is maybe those subscriptions allow you access to 100 photos a month and you only need 20. So is there a friend of yours that you might share the cost of it with? Again, since I'm recording this, I am sure in their terms of service it says you absolutely may not share this with other people, but we're in Tropical Raleigh and I believe sharing is caring. So if Robert called me up and said, hey buddy, I only need about 10 images a month, you want to go have these on this? I would be like, yeah, let's definitely do that. Reposting with credit. So sharing other people's works on social media, as long as you are, you know, giving them their due, I think that's absolutely fine. I do find it to be a personal turnoff on brands that I follow on social media if everything they're doing is someone else's content. You will see, especially on Instagram, a lot of these like influencer accounts and people who are, you know, your guide to Raleigh and blah, 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 all this stuff, and they may not have a physical presence in this town. And that's really common in the media industry. They'll just go and look for the, you know, latest and greatest picture they found tagged with Raleigh, and they'll just repost other people's content. That's fine. I always recommend that if you're going to do that, it needs to be mixed in with a lot of great other stuff too. Trade and professional assets. If you have a membership to an organization which you're paying for, especially professional licensing, where they go out and create infographics and stuff like that, we have a lot of healthcare-based clients that they are members of, you know, Urgent Care Alliance and American Heart Association, things like that. They will publish things, and they'll, you know, absolutely put their business organization name. But from a professional setting, it makes a lot of sense for them to share an infographic from the American Heart Association, for example, or something from juvenile diabetes research if they're a pediatrician. So there's a lot of assets that are probably in your professional trade area that you could absolutely use too. Again, just make sure you're citing the source and giving credit where it's due. User-generated content is also a lot of fun. Again, if you're in a retail, hospitality-driven business, asking your guests and customers to tag you and then reposting their pictures goes a little bit step further in showing off, you know, the interactions that your business have and that other people have taken great photos. And you can absolutely, you know, take some of those images and dress them up and add stuff to it. Like some of the things that we've done for real estate clients and for our hospitality clients is when we get a really great review and a picture from that client, we'll append some of the text from the review with a picture of that client at closing, or a picture that someone took from the rooftop terrace at one of our hotel clients, and, you know, we'll put photo by so-and-so and a little caption from their review. Now, of course, in all these scenarios, we're reaching out first and making sure that they're cool with it, because last thing you want is somebody to see their picture on your social media feed, and then they're like, hello, that's mine. Okay, so one of the big questions is, what file do I send for various projects? Well, it depends on who's asking. So we talked a little bit about when you design print material in Canva, you want to send the PDF that has the crop marks to your printer because they're going to use every bit of that. If you are being asked by an organization that maybe you're doing a sponsorship with, hey, we need your logo. If you can send them your vector version, that's going to give, if they have a professional designer on staff, it's going to give them the best opportunity to use it in as many scenarios as possible. So if they're doing print signage, the vector logo is perfect for that. If they're putting you on the website and has a dark background, they can go and make sure it's transparent or doesn't have a white box around it. There's a lot they can do with that. I think there's also really great opportunities to extend your brand beyond ways you might conventionally think. We just did a custom mail project for a client where we were actually able to put a pretty iconic part of their logo on stamps because they were doing a big direct mail campaign. And we could have said, okay, well, we're just going to get a regular postage stamp. But one of the things we were looking at doing was sending it in a pretty nondescript envelope so it didn't look like commercial mail. But I really loved the idea of putting their brand on the stamp. And it wasn't that significantly more, not given the total cost of their budget for the project. There's a company called Zazzle that does that. There's a lot of other ones. But think about different ways where you could take graphic elements of your brand and extend it as part of your messaging. Printers are going to want your high-resolution files. High-resolution files are going to have a lot more uses to a lot more people, but they're going to be bigger files. So if you're just trying to quickly send something to someone to stick in a Word document, they don't need your biggest one, especially if it's going to delay the process. Or if you're sending them a vector file, you don't have the highest confidence that they have any way to open that file. That is honestly one of the times where we see a lot of issues with logos is when high-quality files are sent to novice users, and they'll go to Google and say, how do I convert this to XYZ? And that's when I see some issues. So a lot of times what I'll ask is, what's the intended use? What are your specifications? What size do you want? And try and send it to them in the way that they requested it. Web and lower resolutions are easier to send, so they're great for email attachments. They're not huge files, so you don't likely need to send them as part of a Dropbox. If you're working on print collateral, those are typically going to be bigger, beefier files, so those are going to need to be packaged and probably not sent as an email attachment. This is also a really good opportunity to use your brand kit, the kind of the one-sheeter that I mentioned earlier. It's nice just to be able to send somebody one PDF that says, here's all my standards, here's a link to everything you need. For event marketing, I don't know if you guys are ever in the sponsorship arena, but this is hugely helpful. When we do the Raleigh Food and Wine Festival every year, we get a lot of restaurants saying, hey, can you send me your logo and your fonts and your colors and stuff, because we want to do some social media graphics promoting it. And I'm like, that's awesome, I would love for you to. I put that all on a landing page on our website, and I just send them that link, and that way they can pick whatever they want to work with. And I don't have to get kind of bogged down in trying to recreate everything for them. All right, so we've got 25 minutes to spare. I think I did pretty good. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to put this whole thing up on my website, so you guys are free to come get it anytime. I'm going to pause the recording so you guys